strategy in Conquest. The overall power level of his individual decks, I'd say, is much above some of the other individual decks we might be seeing in other lineups. And so the Q order might also be a bit important for Okashinsuke here. Gonna start off with the Garrote Rogue into Face Hunter though, which I honestly don't think is that bad of a matchup for the Rogue, as long as they can find the Octobot.
Agreed. Yeah, it is about swarming that board at the start. If you are taking damage like up to turn 3, then I think it becomes very difficult for the Rogue to win. But as you said, if you can cheat out a lot of mana, I think you are in a reasonable position. A matchup where I think you'd rather be on the coin, just so you have an extra card, another chance at Octobot, another card to discount with Octobot, and just because your 1-drops that you can play, not especially impactful, right? You know, you can get out an Orc Merchant on 1 if you want, but there's a fair few ways to punish that as the Hunter.
Maybe less so without Kolkar Pack Runner and Wound Prey, but Tempo King 1-drops, I agree, they're a bit flimsy. At best, they trade into like Volpertingers, which is, you know, not even a 1-for-1 trade. Okashinsuke is still going to keep the field contact though, which I absolutely agree with, because a lot of the time, even if you do land the Octobot, you get to pile onto the board, yes,
yeah,
but one Rinling's Rifle could stave off all of that damage, and then you have to start from scratch. But when you have this killer combo of Octobot and field contact, it means that you're able to clear pretty much any board on the other side. A lot of the Hunter minions are dead to a single Aug Merchant ping, and are very easy to get Prize Plunder up to the range where they run one-shot. And then the Rogue goes wide. The Hunter just has very, very little counterplay against that, and they fall too far behind. But Alutemu keeping the Bone Chewer Brawler plus Adorable Infestation is not the most straightforward combo. I like the Brawler as a coin play, but Infestation, I wonder if he just wants to have a minion that's maybe out of range of Brain Freeze.
Well, Okashinsuke's got everything he ever dreamed of. He has the Octobot in hand. Is he going to play it, though? The obvious punish is Orc Merchant on the other side to buff up the Brawler and just take a clean trade. But I almost feel like you just have to take that risk. Like, if they have that, you're in a really bad spot anyway.
I mean, you can take the turn off and then go Octo-Procto your own the next turn with the Prize Plunderer. It is slow, but Okashinsuke did see a 2-keep from Alutemu, one of those cards being the Brawler. I think that specific combination you insta-keep because it answers an Octobot. Okashinsuke really taking the time. He does end up taking the risk here, and he'll be rewarded as far as we can see unless Alutemu picks up the Aug Merchant here or second Infestation, but it's not there. Octo going to save the day.
Yeah, it's going off, which means that you obviously have the option to just ignore it and send everything face. That, of course, gives a lot more liberty to your opponent as to how they want to proc it, right? It allows them to go Secret Passage and then discount the hand that they draw, or just, you know, one extra card off the draw that they discount as well.
Yeah, if you are going all face, you're kind of saying if there's field contact, one extra card discounted doesn't make a difference. I'm gonna lose anyway. I'd still be inclined to proc it and just pray that there's no field contact because you are better against Hunter in that situation. And he also has a pretty decent way of going about it, right? Using the True Aim Crescent attack to make sure he gets to double attack with the Brawler, and the one going face deals 3. But this should be super easy for Okashinsuke to pick up his special Shadow Step.
That's so sick. Being able to go Contact, Swindle, Plunderer, you can clear both minions. You probably step the Plunderer. I mean, you see what you get off the Swindle first, obviously, but I'm wondering if you can ever get away with stepping the field contact at the end just to have more follow-up afterwards.
I think it's a very real consideration depending on what he gets. And honestly, yeah, I was going to say passage this turn also is a consideration to make sure that you have a turn where the field contact can actually stick with 1 extra mana. That's super doable because then you only have to Prize Plunderer once and you probably pick up another minion that one-shots the Marsoul Cub instead. He's just really looking for Brain Freeze here to not take that much damage.
Right, but what if you miss? This is so risky. He hits the second Secret Passage, so he gets another shot at it. And the Octobot as well is insane to draw here.
Oi, oi, oi.
I take back any reservations I had. You're just a god, Okashinsuke.
even in the worst case scenario where he misses, he takes, I guess, 7 damage on that board, maybe plus a wriggling, 9 to be generous. And then the next turn, you're certainly clearing everything, right? With 4 mana and this many discounts. I don't think that's the end of the world.
Yeah.
But it is kind of the end of the world for Alutemu right now.
It's pretty brutal, huh? He can go buff both, Volpiting buff the Master Cup, and then swing into the Octobot with his, swing with his weapon into the Prize Plunder, and then just go face with his Master Cup because the Octobot's going off anyway. I don't know.
If Alutemu had a read on the field contact being in hand, I think he would just start sending everything face and hopes that his next top decks are aim shot, quick shot, that type of thing. Based on the secret passage last turn, he might think that there is still no field contact in hand, at which point you do just want to take the board, right? If you know there's field contact, the board is a lost cause. It simply never stays.
Yeah. I mean, maybe. Like, they can definitely draw a billion cards and make a huge board. They can't necessarily clear all your minions. I guess they have 4 Org Merchants in the deck. It's pretty likely they're going to be able to clear your board. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, There we go.
He could end with 1 on the field contact as well, because he has so many Shadow Steps. He could end with the Divine Shield. And he really doesn't need to save any combo pieces. You don't need to get to the bottom of your deck to kill them. You simply win on board. And for Alutemu, at this point, it already feels like Rinling's Rifle into Explosive or Bust.
Right, I mean, that's what I was going to bring up, is specifically Rinling's Explosive, because if they do have that, I think you're approaching the position where you're far enough ahead that you can actually start playing around fringe opportunities like that. And so holding back, not necessarily the full combo, but just value for the next turn, making sure you never run out of things to spend your mana on this game is pretty important.
Yeah, and with the Shrouds, though, I think it's totally fine.
Fair.
I don't know if there's a better step target from this point than the Guardian Augmentation. I was actually going to step the Contact. Okay.
Yeah. I guess with the weapon in play, like, it's pretty certain, or, well, with the Master Cup he knows is in hand, it's guaranteed to be able to clear off a Divine Shield contact. But there is the Rifle, to which we were alluding.
It's a big crossroads for Alutemu because he does have access to Wrangler for the Rhino now with the True Aim equipped, which means that the Rhino presents, 12 damage the turn you play it afterward. And so he's not under that much pressure of dying this turn to Explosive Trap, especially with the field contact back in hand. The board probably even just gets bigger the next turn. So I like taking 1 turn of delay with the Rhino. Next turn, depending on the board state, you reevaluate if you actually have the license to play the Rhino. But it gives him outs for counter lethal instead of just looking exclusively for Explosive Trap.
So at this point for Okashinsuke, all he's really missing is actually the Ethereal Org Merchants, because he can quite happily just like play Garots and draw through his deck without having to necessarily draw every card in his deck before he goes for it, because I think he will be representing enough damage to get lethal. If he even just gets 1 spell damage, that would still be enough if he draws all the Garots off it.
Yeah. By no means do you need that many. Like, you can still happily assume as the rogue here that you're going to get even more face damage. So it just depends on how to go about this turn. And I thought it might be another contact turn. Like, if you can build enough targets on board that even if there's Rhino killing 2, you might present counter lethal over 2 turns. I thought that might be good enough. But now I think it's a liability to play anything else that isn't stealth here because he should know about the Rhino. So we could see like the double trade and then I don't know, field contact augmentation? No, that's not good.
Yeah, I mean, what you can do is make it so that you only leave 1 health minions on the board with this line. Wow, I was going to say you end with Penflinger instead of Orc Merchant, but it's the same principle where they can't use the weapon to get a double hit with the Rhino, right? Because they just kill anything that they attack into. So it's going to be max 6 damage coming forward on this turn. And I think from there, Okashinsuke, if he's not hitting lethal, he's at the very least setting it up for the turn after.
Kind of hard without any Octobots left, but maybe. Because you already have to commit to spending contact and then 2 Garots. Yeah, with the prep, then it's only 3 mana you need to spend, and then draw 9 cards. I think that's still a lot, and you're not guaranteed to get the prep before you have to play Garot. But he can very much get ahead on board for the rest of the game, including now. And the Rhino, while it is only dealing 6, it might not ever deal more than 6 is the thing. Alutemu can try and get greedy with the Rinling's rifle, but does he need to buy time or does he need to race?
I mean, I think it's so hard to say, right? Because he's seen both Shadow Steps at this point and 1 Pen Flinger, and 1 Orc Merchant. So the ability for okasinnsuke to deal 24 damage in 1 turn isn't actually there anymore, right? Oh no, sorry, it's exactly 24 with 8 times 3 in terms of the spell damage he can deal. It's so tough. If he was at slightly more health, I might advocate for Rinling's rifle and then try to just hit like explosive into explosive. But I guess with the situation he's in, you have to just hope they go in and then get a better Rinling's next turn.
Yeah, I think that's the plan, but because now okasinnsuke essentially has 2 turns to hit the combo, especially if he can protect his field contact. I guess with no more Guardians, that's not really protecting it from explosive. I think he just gets there with the 24 next turn. You can start going for it now, honestly, if he feels like the only thing he loses to is Rinling's rifle.
Right.
You can put the shuffles in right now, like both the Garots, and then you just go in with second contact the turn after.
Choose soon.
The question is just, do you ever come up short in terms of lethal? Like, if you go for both Garots and then draw all of them and they're able to clear your board with explosive shot, like, I just want to be sure you definitely have the lethal next turn. He has 24 damage, and I think he always has mana to do it now.
Yeah, it sometimes comes off short if you draw the Garots and the Og Merchants at the bottom, because he still needed to draw the other one. Going for it this way, now that he has the Og Merchant in hand, I think he certainly gets the 24 now, even if Alutemu just goes for Explosive Trap here. Is there board space? Yes, there is.
Yes, yeah. I mean, if Explosive Trap isn't played, you know, your field contact is probably just living, and then you're winning the game anyway. If they do hit Explosive Trap here, you, I believe, have perfect mana to just get lethal anyway, because you go Contact, Prep, Garot, Garot, which is 5 mana, and then you just need to play 2 Battlecry minions. The Neophyte does mess with that somewhat, though.
I didn't even realize Alutemu with the perfect combination. He needed not only Explosive to survive on board, he needed the Neophyte to not die to Garot.
Right.
I think this means that he is sometimes alive. Because if okasinnsuke likes, he can just try to draw the 6 Garots off the top, because he still has a contact on board right now.
Oh yeah, he doesn't have to spend 3 mana on contact, so...
You have to Og Merchant first, so each Garot have, and then you can still prep to save 1 mana here.
Yeah.
And then so he can put them in the deck and just draw them all with a Pen Flinger. It works out perfectly, actually.
He's still
with the
got
prep.
it. Yeah, he's got board space as well. Man, oh, that was a close one. I wasn't considering the 3 mana that you saved by by saving the field contact alive. I'm wondering now if Alutemu could have survived if he'd attacked into the field contact instead of going face with his Rinlings and still hoping for Explosive Trap. That, I think, is a bit of a close one, but it was kind of easy to actually count what okasinnsuke had available. Oh, I won't say easy, but possible to count the mana that he had available, the damage that he could work with. Given that he'd already eaten through all the Octobot discounts, Alutemu maybe could have known that lethal wasn't there if there wasn't a field contact in play.
Yeah, maybe. Like, we saw that okasinnsuke could have had like a Hail Mary lethal instead by getting all the points off the top, but it was not guaranteed. And he probably had access to playing less than both Garots, right? If he had to play a field contact as well. So maybe worth revisiting for Alutemu, but man, the way that game played out was so cool. Towards the end here, I thought it was no way for Alutemu to get back into it after we saw double Octobots for okasinnsuke and a field contact to go along with it. But maybe he nearly got there. I don't even know though if he had lethal the next turn, if just okasinnsuke passed the Neophyte turn or traded into it. I don't think Alutemu had enough damage.
Well, that's the... I mean, I was going to say the easy one because I think Rogue is pretty good in these board-based matchups, apologies. But there's a couple of actually pretty good decks left for okasinnsuke. The OTK Demon Hunter, once again, it functions, well, very much like old OTK Demon Hunter and a little bit like Fell Demon Hunter nowadays, where it just has plenty of removal, plenty of lifesteal, and I think it should overall function fairly well against these aggro decks. It's really just that hand lock where I think things could get a little bit shaky for Alutemu, for okasinnsuke, sorry, and easy for Alutemu to beat. But we'll have to see, because first of all, it's going to be the Shadow Priest for Alutemu against that Warlock.
It's really close, right? Because I feel that the fundamental way that Face Hunter and Shadow Priest function is actually quite different, because Shadow Priest is so dependent on getting on board. They have almost no burst at the top end. Actually, zero burst. It all comes from discovering from Elucia or getting the pings in. And so I feel that dynamic is a lot worse versus Handlock that has super consistent board removal, and the Soul Rend is especially devastating to the Shadow Priest. Whereas the Hunter can go over the top with burst, and then the Handlock, their healing is dependent on there being minions on the other side. But when we consider versus OTK Demon Hunter, there is a lot of removal and healing, but I find it often can shape up weirdly versus Shadow Priest, or just in an inconvenient way. They play a couple Divine Shield minions, or even just 2 minions and a Traveling Merchant. You already have to ask, do I have to Immolation Aura this? Is it worth it? You feel like it's not worth it, you hold on, you get hit in the head for 1,000,000, and then suddenly you have to use Fellscream Blast, of which you're only running 2. I feel like that matchup is not so bad for the Shadow Priest compared into Handlock, but okasinnsuke is gonna start off with that Handlock here into the Shadow Priest, which I think is something you'd rather face than Face Hunter. It depends though, because there is some counterplay against Soul Rend with the Cult Neophytes and the ability to grant Divine Shield.
Yeah, I weirdly enough, I think I disagree. I think I would rather face Face Hunter as the handlock than I would against Shadow Priest, especially with the Bread Baker in there, because that's such a key card against Hunter once they transition over to the burn plan. Like, a lot of the time, I find that Soul Rend is much more devastating against Hunter than it is against Shadow Priest.
Really?
Like, it's less so now that the Divine Shields have been started being teched into Hunter, but I just find that Shadow Priest just has so many ways to work around it. They can buff their minions to over 5 health some of the times. The Divine Shield of Orc Merchant is a nightmare. They have obviously Elucia, they have the Cult Neophytes as well. Gandling doesn't even die to it as well on its own. I think there's just enough disruption to the point where Soul Rend isn't the overwhelming board clear you kind of need it to be in the matchup.
That's true. It's not always all sweeping, and we do see a lot of the cards you just mentioned already kept in the mulligan. okasinnsuke holding onto the Touch of the Naturism too, I completely agree with, just to make sure you have the healing to get there. The way that Handlock functions as a control deck is that they need to be removing things very proactively, but by doing that, it means they're not spending turns tapping, which means they are not getting to the Giants or the Knolls or Anetheron as quickly. They are not as likely to find 1/3 Tamsin, which is a very, very powerful card when you're trying to get a lot of healing. But it's always a balance, right? When are you able to weave in the taps? And the questions start as early as turn 2.
They do. I mean, there's also questions whether or not you hero power on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and say probably no, because I don't think your opponent is likely... Okay, your opponent can clear off more than 1 minion on this turn. If they have one of the 1-cost removal, coin one of the 2-cost removals, but I don't even know if they'd necessarily bother with that. And so I think you're fairly likely to be able to get Wriggling Horror next turn, which means you could just save your ping for when you absolutely need it.
That's fair. I don't think there was any rush. I agree, because Alutemu did have a play for the next turn, even if slightly off curve. Questions begin for okasinnsuke. My gut feeling is that this still ends up being a tap because he can set up for coin soul rend.
Yeah.
But you did mention there are quite a few counterplays for priest into that, putting divine shield on one of the minions, getting occult neophyte online. So it looks like he is going to respect at least the tour guide here, not tap, because the tap also would deal 3 to him because of the void touched attendant. But he'll be pretty happy to see this as a super clean soul run on the other side.
Yeah, it's sick. I'm kind of surprised to see this play from okasinnsuke. I think I also would have led to tap, but the other play I was considering was Touch of the Nathrezim and Mortal Coil the 1-3, just to try and stem some of the damage coming through. But this play, I suppose, does save a little bit more healing with the touch still in hand. And either way, as you said, it's a back-breaking board clear here for Alutemu. He does not have the kind of hand that can stand up to Soul Rend unless he gets exactly raised dead into some pretty good minions. That's not a bad top deck.
Okay, but there's no Tiny Fins nor Dust Imps, so the Gandling, if it comes down this turn, is on its own. Gandling is somewhat inconvenient for okasinnsuke to deal with, but the premium answer is, of course, Unstable Shadow Blast. A lot of hand locks have been cutting it. There's only one copy in okasinnsuke's list as well, so Alutemu can take that risk. And if the Gandling sticks, boy oh boy, the Raised Dead is doing a lot of work, and he's already seen a Soul Rend.
Yeah, I think I like starting with Raised Dead. Like, you could save it to try and Raise Dead the Gandling afterwards if it's killed by an Unstable Shadow Blast. But this, I think, gives you a bit of flexibility. You can choose whether you want to go with Gandling or 1-drops and Hero Power. I do think you probably just end up on Gandling here. Like, the downside of turning a Void Attendant into a 4/4 is probably still an upside overall, even if you lose the effect of the +1 damage.
And I was going to agree, but Alutemu says something different. I expect he holds on to the tour guide to make sure he has a 4/4 with Gandling next turn. But for okasinnsuke, it's a small matter to deal with the Void Touch. He doesn't actually have Drain Soul right now.
Right, I'm going to go ahead and say it's not worth Soul Rend number 2, so I would just lead up to a tap here, most likely. He could try and get away with just Spice Bread Baker, of course, in order to get something on board and heal up a little bit.
Kind of like that. I mean, it warrants a ping to get through it, which is, you know, if Alutemu was just going to ping that turn, that's kind of an upside, right? I guess he might play 1 or 2 more minions. He knows about 1 card in hand being a Raised Dead target. And then the other one, no exact read, but there aren't that many cards that Alutemu would end up floating a lot of mana on, right? Because he ended up playing a 1-drop and ping there. So I wonder if you could have any read on Gandling. And the Baker lines up really well into a Gandling turn because then the response is Soul Rend plus Touch of the Nathrezim. It's really close though.
Yeah, it does. Ends up on Bristleback here, which I was considering because it's obviously pretty good in the same way. The +1 health is kind of nice when there's going to be a 2/5 taunt on the other side. But with Alutemu picking up a pretty timely Murloc Tiny Fin, I think he's going to be feeling good. But as you said, it's just the perfect response here for okasinnsuke. The second Soul Rend, the last thing you want to see for Alutemu, is so clutch.
Yeah, I mean, that's just unlucky for Alutemu. You never play around the second one. Love this from okasinnsuke. Get the 3 lifesteal before you go for the game-winning play. And I'm just gonna go ahead and say that's it, because even Ilusha into this hand is not doing very much.
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? You can't play Flesh Giant, obviously, because you've only damaged yourself once.
Okay, wait, hold on.
The Raised Dead, but that's a pretty good draw.
That gets Gandling back, maybe? Nah.
It's not bad, and admittedly, okasinnsuke's turn here is not fantastic, right? He can't play Flesh Giant quite yet. He can play the Null, which is pretty good, but not necessarily game-winning quite yet. Probably
start
is.
Raise Dead, so then the Null goes to 5 mana and he can fit in a tour guide. I like that. I mean, as long as the Null hits the board this turn, I'm happy because it takes a nice trade into the 1/4, which means it's not dead to ping just yet. It's the same as Shaman. You love to play Canal Slogger and trade into a 1-attack minion, so that sometimes it gets 2 value trades.
Have 2 minions even died this game, though? Is it just the Bristleback?
Oh, you're right. It is just a Bristleback. My bad. Yeah, that would have been a disaster then. Just the damage.
Yeah.
Although the Bristleback is active next turn.
That's true. That's actually a pretty sick raise dead then, isn't it? Like, I mean, you could then just go like tap Bristleback and just kill off the 2/3, for example, and heal up for a bunch. Also sounds pretty good. I think there's a lot of plays you can make on this turn, most of which end up winning you the game.
Yeah. I think given that there's only 1 minion in the pool, it's probably just the Null into the 1/4. I mean,
yep.
It just has so much healing the next turn. Oh, really?
Dead to ping?
I guess he wants it dead so he can raise dead it, maybe?
Not the high-value top decks that Alutemu needs. It's approaching Voracious Reader or Bust. Maybe an Alusha to steal his opponent's raise dead on this turn. Could have put up enough pressure. Say he'd gotten raise dead into another attendant. He may have been able to get there. But as it stands, it's all just too slow.
Agreed. So it's Null and Bristleback in the pool right now.
Oh, man.
Not both of them playable this turn, but it's more than enough to get there.
Yeah, you can go Bread Baker plus Bristleback if you want. Again, you're constantly thinking about Alusha. How can things go wrong if they top deck that on the next turn? And to me, at least, the answer was just to go Bread Baker, Bloodshard, Bristleback so that you get rid of all your healing cards before they can steal them.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised to see the coil too, because now the Bristleback doesn't actually heal, right?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
a lifesteal effect. It's going on a Divine Shield at best here. But I guess this is still strong. He heals for plenty no matter which of the healing effects he plays. You're right about Alusha being Alutemu's only realistic out by this point. So what is the most effective thing that Alusha can steal from this hand? Let me play it right now, is where Okashinsuke's mind.
Yeah. Okay, it's the other 3-mana 1/3 that's pretty good here for Alutemu. Maybe if he can get himself Alusha off of this, maybe his opponent has a relatively dead turn. But I think, as he knows, with guaranteed double Bristleback in hand, it's going to be real tough to fight back against all that healing, all that board control as well.
I want a Bristle Giant here. Does that ever lose?
I don't think so.
Yeah, oh, and he had the free tap as well, so yep. Giant down to 1 mana. He can even fit in the Touch of the Nathrazim if he wants. Doesn't really do anything.
Just for the fun of it. But there we go. Alutemu throws it down. Even with an Alusha top deck, I think he realizes there was just too much pressure from Okashinsuke. And it's a couple of really big wins for Okashinsuke. The Hunter and the Priest both losing to the Rogue and the Warlock, which means he only has left his OTK Demon Hunter to win with. A deck that I was describing as a premier anti-aggro deck with all the removal and the lifesteal available. But you were saying you have some reservations about its capabilities of removing aggro boards.
Yeah, I mean, particularly Shadow Priest, I think it's a great matchup into Face Hunter because the type of boards that Face Hunter build are very predictable. Immolation Aura deals with a lot of them super cleanly without having to expend even more combo pieces. But with Shadow Priest, like we saw from here, even the 2/5 Homunculus can be a problem. And the thing with Shadow Priest is any minion becomes a threat when you are running Void Touched Attendant and being able to raise dead quite a few of them. So even just boards of 2 or 3 minions, especially when you add Traveling Merchant into the mix, I feel can sometimes be problematic for Demon Hunter. Still think it's a good matchup, but not unwinnable. However, Alutemu is going to swap over to the Garrote Rogue instead, which I think is a great matchup for the Garrote Rogue. Should get rolling a lot faster than Kerchus in the OTK Demon Hunter.
Yeah, Alutemu going with the tasting menu of his lineup here, just sampling each one after the other and seemingly losing with each one after the other. I do think he's got himself probably the best matchup he's had so far out of Hunter vs Rogue, Priest vs Warlock, and now Rogue vs Demon Hunter, as you said. The list that he has as well, I think, is perfectly fine. I don't think it especially helps or hinders him. Kazakus does give you a little bit of flexibility in your game plan because you still have that curve potential of 4 into 5 cost Golem in order to draw cards, maybe put on a threat. 2 5/5 Divine Shields are very difficult for Demon Hunter to deal with. But for the most part, it's just a combo enabler. You pick a 1 cost Golem, it's another cheap battle cry that further powers up your field contacts.
Yeah, it could be a battle cry or spell damage, depending on what you need for the situation, right? Because this is a matchup where, as always, you're free to expend some of the combo pieces, but the damage permanence is not a thing. So at best, I mean, most of the time you should feel safe by just holding on to 1 Ethereal Aug Merchant and 1 Shadow Step or 2 Ethereal Aug Merchants. Using any more than those, you suddenly have to discover some additional things to actually make sure you can get to post 30 with the damage. Not impossible, but harder to do without 1 Thief, because instead Alutemu is running the Pen Flingers, which will, I suppose, more consistently help him get draw, because it's like always coming back to your hand as an additional battle cry. But it means also that he probably needs to retain an Octobot for the end game part of the combo, just so he has a minion with enough health to receive 2 procs of the Ethereal Aug Merchant.
Gia, ever the professional here, trying not to say I absolutely detest this list from Alutemu, the Pen Flingers, because I mean, I think it's often erroneous for me to assume that certain builds of decks are like training wheels versions. I think that's a concept that comes up a lot with these combo decks, where you have versions that they give you a little bit more wiggle room, they give you slightly more rooms to make mistakes, but I think it doesn't necessarily mean that they're worse because of that. Like, I agree, I think that the One Thieves are pretty good cards in the matchup. Penflinger has yet to amaze me, and also, in a way, maybe not for Alutemu, who's looked pretty strong so far, but training wheels are kind of a good thing. We've seen players mess up with their overdraws with this Garrote Rogue. It's very difficult to keep track with Pen Flingers bouncing back, especially with the secret passage turns to not overdraw key pieces. But we'll have to see, as Alutemu looks like he's got himself a pretty good hand here, actually. I think Octobot, Shroud, and Kazakus all look like pretty good keeps to me.
In the middle for sure. Kazakus, I am unconvinced. Like, it's a pretty good on-4 play, but Kazakus often feels like a bonus to this deck, right? You're not winning off the back of 5/5 Divine Shields because you're not running Tenwu anymore. That used to be pretty good against OTK Demon Hunter. So I'd much rather have every other spot available for field contact. Like, my rule of thumb with keeping here is I'm keeping Octobot, field contact, and cards that can draw Octobot or field contact. But Alutemu is keeping Kazakus here, maybe going to prove me wrong a little bit. Back to the Penflinger point you brought up, it has actually impressed me a little bit, specifically with Possessi versus Mage, just because it had that utility of bouncing back to the hand and there'd be less targets. But I certainly see the upside in that it's like a card that is never dead as long as you have field contact, whereas Prep can be dead in hand if you have the field contact. Even if you have the field contact, if you've drawn one of those pan outs where the Shrouds and the Swindles come beforehand. I do think Penflinger is not the fastest of the options because it is just another battle cry that is only drawing 1 card per field contact proc, but it definitely has its upsides.
Yeah, we're not going to be coining out the Octobot here, I don't think, as Alutemu. I mean, there's very limited ways your opponent would be able to clear it, but because you don't have a way to guaranteed proc it yourself next turn, we're just going to take it slow here. And I absolutely agree. Probably turns out the curve is Neophyte, Shroud, Kazakus, maybe 5 cost Golem, and then reevaluate most likely when you're 5 turns later.
The choice on 5 or 1 is also not certain, depending on whether or not he sees a field contact off of the Shroud or off his natural draws. But for Okashinsuke, this hand is not the Turbo Quest hand he's looking for. No Sigil, no Tusk Piercer. The double jump can get Spectral, but if it misses on that, then he's not even able to get a guaranteed proc on Quest 1 next turn, which is already feeling like you're far too slow, because the ideal curve for Demon Hunter is the 3-4-5 Quest 1-2-3 into Kurtrus on 6. And even that that curve, I feel, can sometimes be too slow versus the Garrote Rogue.
So are you ever considering Queen Shroud here? Because it would allow you to very possibly go Octobot plus one of the Orc Merchants or Prize Plunderer.
Ooh. I mean,
wow.
that is a curve you can think about, but just dropping Octobot is, you know, valid. Demon Hunter can't kill this unless they have exactly Moarg or Arcanist with I-Beam in outcast position, right?
Yeah, or Chaos Leech here off the Illidari studies would also be able to cleanly clear it off. But again, that's a pretty fringe out to play around.
Sigil Runner is not the perfect one he wanted, but he can take the gamble of drawing with this. If he gets double jump off of it, he can complete quest, but you can also go again with the studies for another Sigil Runner, but the thing is you can't start with the studies because it will lock that first runner into non-outcast. But he got the double jump. Hey.
Wow. Okay. I've got to say, I was kind of interested in holding on... in starting off with the Illidari studies there. As I said, there was the potential for Chaos Leech to deny your opponent the reduction, which is, I think, worth a lot, even if there's just a small chance of doing so. And you could still then just follow up with double jump, and whatever you draw would still cost one less, right? So you still have the potential to go for the quest completion on that turn as well.
But it's potential, right, rather than guarantee. So it's like...
I mean, it was all potential, right? If he misses the card draw there, he's still in a rough spot.
Oh, fair. Like, by the time you play the first Sigil is what you mean.
Exactly, yeah.
But for Alutemu, the pickup of the prep is not as good as it looks. Honestly, he wanted anything that can get discounted here because I'm pretty sure the whole point of Octobot on 2 is leading up to Shroud first and then discount those minions with the Octobot. Still not bad though. Like, you're not going to be overly greedy. It's still a very clean Shroud turn as far as I can see. Alternatively, he could bump and then play Kazakus, but I'd rather get a discount on 2 things than 1.
You could alternatively coin Kazakus and then choose a 1 and discount that, but yeah, this is probably good. Going for 5, I would imagine. I think you picked Divine Shield there on the first option. And then out of the remaining ones, I'm going to go ahead and guess that it was +2/+2 that he decided to go for, which is an interesting approach. Again, it far from locks out the combo game plan, but it's playing much more credence to the aggro game plan than I think a lot of players would go for, or the board-based game plan, I should say.
Oh, this glide is enormous though.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Puts back a coin and the golem and resets all of the discounts from the Octobot. That's amazing for okasinnsuke here. Alutemu, honestly, I thought the play was pretty creative to go for like the old Miracle Rogue type of game plan versus UTK Demon Hunter. I didn't think that was the main way you win the game, but I guess he had the flexibility with that hand to choose either option, especially without field contact yet. But I mean, no matter what game plan he was going for, that glide was gonna wreck him.
Yeah, and to be fair, his game plan was slightly better against Glide because he didn't play the Shroud, and so now he still has a premium piece of card draw to top deck at any point throughout the game.
Fair enough.
Okay, well, there is that Golem that can give +2/+2 to everything next turn, sorry. And so... you can try and set up for that. The problem is that most of your cards end up shooting your own minions here. That makes it a lot harder to stick anything.
And they call your minions losers. How mean. Yeah, I'd probably commit a Guardian Og Merchant because it actually strengthens the board. And then call it a day.
Uh-huh.
Like dagger hit face, then you kind of expect just the Octobot to die maybe with the swing of the Tusk Piercer, and then buffing 2 minions with the 5-cost Golem is pretty good.
That is pretty good. Good to start Prize Plunder as well to go a little bit wider. Again, they need to have some form of AoE here to be able to actually clear off anything.
Okay. I think this is fine because the upshot of Penflinger once again is that it can function as multiple battle cries in hand. It still requires a spell But Alutemu is not super sad if he gets field contact after playing 2 1-cost minions because he still has Pen Flanger.
True. Oh man, but I think for Okashinsuke, this is just the dream, right? He can complete the quest with acrobatics, trade if he has to, and then redraw it with a swing of the weapon. And Immolation Aura will then very happily clear the board.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't have to trade, but I do agree because this board deserves an Immolation Aura. I don't think he can have a particularly good read on the Golem because it was shuffled back and he doesn't even know if it's 5 or 1 or if it buffs the board. But just the fact that the Talented is such an expensive combo piece to throw out there just to draw from acrobatics, I think it's fine to just trade. There's Kurchas in hand, swing into Kazakus, and Immo in any order you like. And probably just fit the philosophy in because he's used as a glide, right? This Morg is not getting any cheaper.
Yeah, absolutely. The combo potential very much coming online for Okashinsuke. Alutemu, another victim of glide here with no card draw to follow up. That looked like another Garrot off the top, which is like the worst draw in his deck. He just gives up. He throws it down. Alutemu wanting nothing more to do with this. And Okashinsuke in a 3-0 sweep over one of the best players here in Asia Pacific is going through to the finals.
And Alutemu gives no hint of the fact that conceding is even running through his mind. Like, we saw a super early concede from Glory yesterday, also for similarly justifiable reasons. But before that, he was shaking his head. He was like, oh, this sucks. I had the worst hand in the mirror. I'm going to throw it down here. Alutemu is just like tapping his chin, thinking, I must have some grand plan, is what I thought. But he's like, nah, I don't want any more of this. He's just going to give it down to Okashinsuke. And fair enough, right? This Golem was 5 mana, 5/5 Divine Shield. Even just playing Kurchas into that, it's hardly presenting any threat. And even if he top decked Field Contact off the top, like, he was hardly able to proc it unless it was Miracle, Miracle, Miracle after that. And he was so far from his deck that it would be impossible to get the Garrots down soon enough. Man, I've constantly been underestimating this OTK Demon Hunter. I thought Garrot Rogue would be a great matchup into that, but it was just too fast, and the glide completely destroyed Alutemu's draws.
Any gliders in the chat? We need to know because it has just been the terror of APAC GM so far today. Incredible.